Hi. This is The Reaper by Ray of Frost, chapters 21 and 22. Chapter 21. Final Exams. Dinky was nervous, not for the written exams like his classmates assumed, but for the practicals. Months had passed since Keigo's staged death, and the man was radio silent the entire time. Dinky could sense that Nezu had made some form of terrible plan revolving around his feathered friend. Undoubtedly, the rat had a convoluted scheme that caused the most chaos and exasperation to mankind possible. Despite their friend's plight, Izuku and Hitoshi seemed unfazed by the brewing storm. The electric teen knew this meant he shouldn't be concerned, but he didn't have the confidence his friends radiated. He wasn't aware that they were just as anxious as he was. Tension was at an all-time high as Class 1A gathered outside. Mr. Aizawa refused to give them any hints about the practicals, but some upperclassmen said they fought robots. The class really hoped that robots were the worst thing they'd have to face. The tense atmosphere was on the verge of exploding after the group stood in silence for a minute. Aizawa took a deep breath. I'm sure by now you've heard from the upperclassmen that in previous years the practical exams were identical to the entrance exam. A fight against robots to see how much you've improved. The teacher's words only caused the class's stress to grow. In light of recent events, it's been decided that the exams needed to be changed. Dread pulled in Dinky's stomach, threatening to overflow. Instead of fighting robots, Aizawa started. A red feather fluttered to the ground, followed by the wind associated with the beat of heavy wings, and Dinky's heart dropped. You'll be fighting your teachers and chasing me, Keigo announced as he landed swiftly. With the former number 3 hero's dramatic entrance, it took a second for the students to realize the principal was settled in his arms. Most of the students took the option to freak out over the heroes supposedly back from the dead. Keigo was decked out in brand new gear similar to the costumes worn by the outcast heroes in training. His outfit was red, the jacket was unhooded, and he didn't have boots. The lack of gloves and footwear put his talented hands and avian feet on full display, the claws clacking on the smooth pavement. Dark goggles rested on his head, along with headgear made from matte black plates. The head armor wrapped around the back of his head and came to a point in front of his face to create the look of an eagle's beak. With the press of a button on his temple, the gear covering his face collapsed to reveal his face. The sharp points of the faux beak rested around his ears and reached for the sky. Aizawa sighed at the utter chaos erupting from his problem class. This was the worst possible time to reveal that Keigo was very much alive. You died! Ida shouted. The bespectacled teen was pale and wide-eyed, like he was addressing a ghost. I was there when the EMT pronounced you dead. There was so much blood. Ida looked around for a second and locked eyes with Kaminari. Kaminari! You were there. You saw too. Dinky winced at the accusation. The disarray continued for a few more seconds before Nezu finally decided to take control of the situation. Keigo here will be an integral part of your exams today. He doesn't have an active hero license, so this will serve as his test to get one through UA. Do not ask him any questions, and word of his existence will not be shared. He plans on going into underground heroics. He may bear a resemblance to the former pro-hero Hawks, but Hawks was declared dead by medical professionals, and he will remain that way. This is Keigo, and he will be your primary target during today's exam. You'll be put in teams of 5 based on your skill sets and personalities, Aizawa continued. Your directive is to retrieve your flag from Keigo and escape the city within 20 minutes. 2 teachers will do everything they can to prevent you from achieving those objectives, and there is only one exit. You will not know who your teachers will be, but they will each have a handicap. Keigo grinned and raised 4 brightly colored flags in the air. Each team will be assigned a color. You need to make sure you grab the right one. I'll be replacing them after each test for the sake of fairness. For my handicap, I'll be wearing weights to slow me down and keep me from soaring too high. Dinky nearly fainted. This test would be the death of him. Test 1. The loud ones. Red. On Stealth and Recon, we have Toru Higakure, or Invisible Girl. The heavy hitter will be Katsuki Bakugo. On Speed or Capture is Mina Ishido. On the melee fighter will be Mashiro Ojiro, or Tailman. The wild card is Ochako Uraraka, or Uravity. And the teachers are Cementos and Present Mike. Their handicap is that they must remain stationary. This group was formed with the idea of encouraging Bakugo to work with a team. It was also designed to help boost Higakure and Ojiro's confidence. Ashido and Uraraka had the right personalities to help with Higakure and Ojiro's confidence, but they were also assertive enough to stand their ground against Bakugo. Cementos and Present Mike were chosen as they were the best at combating such a destructive group. Their handicap, to remain stationary, meant that they had to choose a location before the start of the test and remain there for the duration of the test. The 5 students entered the city with a single, straightforward plan. Brute force their way to victory in the most brutal way possible. Bakugo took the lead, naturally. With a signature cry of, "Die!" the test began. It took 4 minutes for one of them to spot red feathers, and a loud chase ensued. Mina rushed through the streets on her acid with Ojiro closely behind. The two were quickly outpaced by the former pro. Back where the chase began, Bakugo began giving orders. "Invisibitch, look for the exit. Radio in your location when you find it. Keep an eye out for the teachers while you're at it. The more info, the better." Higakure nodded and ran off. Or at least that's what he assumed. The girl's new costume turned invisible on command and provided her with actual protection. The sound-dampening boots eliminated her presence nearly entirely. "Oi, round face!" The explosive blonde turned to the brunette. "How about we test that combo move you suggested?" The duo shared a murderous grin. Keigo ducked through another alleyway. The 2 chasing him were relentless, and the weight slowed him down more than he anticipated. It was like a wild goose chase through the mock city. He hadn't seen or heard anything from the rest of the students since the chase started 5 minutes ago, and the avian man had a feeling they had something planned. He quickly had to dodge a neon sign. Turning around, he noticed he had shaken off his pursuers. But he recognized that sign. They led him in a circle. A resounding boom, accompanied by the yell of "Space Shuttle Blitz!" came from further up the street. Rocketing at unprecedented speed towards Keigo was one Katsuki Bakugo. Keigo tried to swerve out of the way or slow down, but the extra momentum from the weights drug him forward into the oncoming attack. "Die, chicken legs!" Bakugo howled, and launched a bright, flashy explosion directly into Keigo's face. Keigo's goggles saved his eyes from extended damage, but he was still blinded for the short time the explosion lasted. When the white light subsided, the flying blonde had already passed. Keigo swiftly checked his belt, and just as he figured, the red flag was missing. The feathered blonde sighed and flew in pursuit of the fleeing students. 10 minutes remained for the test, and the students were heading straight for the danger zone. As if on cue, an ear-splitting yell cut through the mock city. Following the initial attack, a deep rumbling shook foundations as entire city blocks crumbled to the ground. Cementos used his quirk to weaken the structural integrity of the buildings to make President Mike's attack look more potent than it actually was. The flat expanse of concrete was the perfect playground for Cementos' quirk and provided no cover from President Mike's attacks. Cementos stood directly in front of the exit gate, and a meter-thick concrete wall blocked the exit from the students. Hagakure shrieked as she was blown back in the initial attack. Mina rushed to catch her. "Hagakure, are you okay?" Mina asked. "I'm fine," the invisible girl grunted. Her suit was now visible, showing off the armored padding and durable equipment. It was the only way she could tank the potential damage. "I don't think they knew I was there, but stealth is a moot point with you guys as my teammates." "Sorry about that," Ojiro apologized. "That's not the point right now," Hagakure replied. "The problem is how organized those two are. They placed themselves so their attacks wouldn't interfere with each other, and together they pose a formidable offense and defense. I don't know if brute force will be enough." Brute force was, in fact, enough, but just barely. They nearly ran out the clock, but Bakugo barely managed to demolish the massive wall blocking the gate. Hagakure slipped through the exit in the ensuing battle, announcing the students' victory. Test 2. The Squeamish. Yellow. Stealth and Recon. Koji Koda. Anima. Heavy Hitter. Fumikage Tokuyami. Tsukiyomi. Speed and Capture. Tenya Ida. Ingenium. Melee Fighter. Rikido Sato. Sugarman. Wildcard. Denki Kombinari. Amber Axolotl. Teachers. Power Loader and Midnight. Handicap. No physically contacting the students. This team consisted of those who would be the most easily flustered. Koda disliked bugs, confrontation, and loud noise. Tokuyami was weak to light and bad at handling attention. Ida was so straight-laced, any act of deviance from an authority figure would throw him off. Sato was scared of Midnight, and Denki was the only one in the wild card group that would fit. Midnight and Power Loader were chosen to make them face their fears. Their handicap, no physically contacting the students, meant they couldn't engage in close-range combat with the students. This was mostly to prevent Power Loader from using his giant mech suit. Tokuyami didn't know what to think about his teammates. The last thing he expected was the argument between Ida and Denki. The two had been arguing for the last few minutes, and the contrast between Ida's red face and Denki's blank expression was quite startling. Ida looked like he was having a childish tantrum. "Why are you so nonchalant? You were there that day. What is wrong with you?" Ida yelled like a raving madman. Denki slowly blinked and sighed. "Ida," the blonde said, with enough authority to get the bespectacled teen to shut up. "Hawks died in Hosu. Keigo is not Hawks. I know him personally. Their similarities are coincidental. One thing that I know for sure is that Keigo would rather die than be a daylight hero, so drop the subject." Ida looked at Denki like the blonde just told him there were two moons. "There are too many similarities between the two for it all to be coincidental." "You were pretty out of it back in Hosu, and you weren't in your right mind when I found you. If you need a break, I'm sure the teachers will understand." Ida deflated like a punctured balloon, collapsing at Denki's feet and breaking into sobs. Tokuyami didn't know exactly what happened in Hosu, but there was enough to get a rough idea of the picture. It wasn't pretty. Denki comforted the taller teen and motioned Tokuyami over, much to his dismay. Denki spoke in a soft voice that seemed uncharacteristic for the blonde, but oddly fitting. "Could you go find a teacher? Ida really needs some time to recover." The look in Denki's eyes was soft, but there was an underlying glint of what appeared to be guilt. Guilt for what? Tokuyami didn't know. Maybe he just felt bad about letting Ida try and hold himself to the point of breaking without interfering sooner. Whatever it was, Ida would not be joining them for the final exam. After Ida was escorted away by Mr. Aizawa, Denki shifted from concerned and comforting to a front of cold and all business. We're down a man and our greatest source of speed. We know we won't face Aizawa, Present Mike, or Cementos. Our best bet would be to stick together and use Koda's quirk for recon and the retrieval of the flag. I'm terrible at planning, but I'll think of something in the heat of the moment. Sato and Koda looked at each other nervously, put off by Denki's intensity. The moment they entered the city, Midnight confronted them. The crack of her whip made Sato visibly flinch. As promised, Denki was already forming solutions to handle the threat in front of him. Sato, help Koda get out of here. Go after the flag, he commanded. Tokiyami, is Dark Shadow susceptible to gas attacks? No, the bird-headed teen replied, but he is susceptible to the light your quirk emits. Denki's reply was a smirk. That won't be a problem, he said while pulling out a whip with an electrical plug at the end. All we need to do is pin her down. My quirk won't be necessary for that. Tokiyami shuddered. What did that international hero teach him? And how is he completely unfazed by Midnight's... everything? You know, Midnight, I think you and Irina would get along great, Denki shouted. The boy ducked under a strike from her whip. Or you two would clash because you're too similar. The blonde sidestepped another attack and pulled a mask over his mouth and nose. He suddenly darted forward, swinging his whip at the R-rated heroine. The whip wrapped around Midnight's arm. Denki sparked with electricity and sent a charge through the whip, shocking Midnight like a taser. The teacher's limbs locked up and she dropped like a sack of potatoes. Denki ran over with a handful of zip ties he procured from one of his jacket pockets. The fluffy tendrils meant to resemble an axolotl's gills gave him an uncanny silhouette. Tokoyami, he called from within the fog of Midnight's quirk. Let's go. The four regrouped halfway through the forest and made a break for the exit. Koda used a swarm of pigeons to retrieve the yellow flag, and none of them had seen the other teacher yet. The quartet had the exit in sight when they were hit in the face with multiple spotlights. I think the other teacher is power loader, Sato grumbled. You're probably right, Denki agreed. Stand back for a minute, I'm heading in. Denki put his goggles over his eyes and stormed ahead. There was a flash of electricity and the lights died. There was the crack of a whip and a girlish shriek. After a moment of deafening silence, Denki was spotted again, dragging an unconscious power loader wrapped up in his whip. They didn't take long to find the exit gate and pass. Test 3. The well-rounded. Color, blue. Stealth and recon. Mezos Shoji. Tentacool. Heavy hitter, Shoto Todoroki, Shoto. Speed and capture, Hantasero, Cellophane. Melee fighter, Ajiro Kirishima, Red Riot. Wildcard, Hitoshi Shinzo, Violet Cat. Teachers, Ectoplasm and Snipe. Handicap, half the maximum number of clones and rubber bullets only. This match was made of all the most well-rounded students. All the students in this group can serve multiple roles and have a wide array of specialties. For example, Shoji can do recon and be a melee fighter. Sero is a mobility and capture specialist. And Shinzo is a long-range fighter, capture specialist, and stealth expert. Both Snipe and Ectoplasm have various abilities, and Ectoplasm's clones can help overwhelm the students with few glaring weaknesses. Snipe was perched on one of the two large towers guarding the gate. He waited for the chaos to begin. Watching through his scope, he witnessed Keiko get chased around the courtyard of the faux castle until he was encased in a titanic glacier. Todoroki climbed up the structure and used his fire to melt his way to the flags on Keiko's belt. While this happened, Kirishima, Sero, and Shoji fended off Ectoplasm's clones. The cowboy-themed hero began pelting the trio with rubber bullets, hampering their attempts to push through the volley of clones. He continued his onslaught until he heard a soft tap on the metal of his perch. He whipped his head around and found his mask inches from Shinzo. "Snipe, do you have visual on Shinzo? I haven't seen him," Ectoplasm called, presumably over the comms. His hand slowly reached for his gun as he replied, "I have a direct visual. I'm handling..." Snipe trailed off as Shinzo's quirk took effect. Sadistic glee glinted in Shinzo's eyes, reminding Snipe far too much of his caffeine-addicted coworker. "Shoot Ectoplasm and his clones until they stop fighting." With a robotic stiffness, Snipe unloaded 4 magazines of rubber bullets into the horde of Ectoplasm clones. As he loaded a 5th magazine, he was snapped out of Shinzo's control. A buzzer rang across the battleground, signaling the students' victory. Test 4, The Strategists. Green. Stealth and Recon, Kyokujiro, Earphone Jack. Heavy Hitter, Izuku Midoriya, Viridian Rabbit. Speed and Capture, Minoru Mineta, Grape Juice. Melee Fighter, Tsuyu Asui, Frappy. Wildcard, Momo Yaoyorozu, Creati. Teachers, Eraserhead and Nezu. Handicap, no verbal communication. Mineta thought he was in heaven. All of the people on his team were women. Sure, the stupid Pomeranian ruined the appeal of Yaoyorozu's costume, but she was still a total babe. Jiro was okay looking, but then there was Asui and her... crud. Every hair on Mineta's body rose in fear. Shakily he turned to the final member of his team, her face covered in ominous shadows. "Mineta," she called. "Don't think I can't hear your dirty thoughts." The short teen quaked in terror as Midoriya's toxic green eyes bore into him. "You better focus, or you'll have hell to pay," she threatened. The point of this grouping was an excuse for Nezu to prod the strategic genius of 1A's brightest. Mineta was thrown in with the headstrong females of the class, plus Midoriya, to hopefully straighten him out. Aizawa was picked because of his ability to go unnoticed and pick off the students one by one. Their handicap prevents them from verbally communicating with one another, leaving them to act as individual entities rather than a team. Mineta was the first to be picked off. He was wrapped up in Noizawa's capture weapon and yanked onto the upper part of the maze, where he was swiftly tied up and left knocked out in a dead end. Jiro followed shortly after. She was too much of a threat when left alone, but catch her off guard and she dropped out like a fly. The rat swung his wrecking ball like the maniac he was and used the destroyed walls to change the maze's layout. For whatever reason, Midoriya seemed unfazed by the chaos and missing comrades. The calculative teen observed the dead end he walked his team into. Aizawa watched with curiosity as Midoriya pulled a grappling gun out of his jacket. Then he pointed the gun directly to him and fired. He handled the grappling gun to Asui. A second grapple gun fired, and Asui and Yaoyorozu ascended the wall. Midoriya followed, being propelled by Black Whip. Aizawa activated his quirk on Midoriya, but the initial launch was enough to scale the wall along with his teammates. Asui and Yaoyorozu made a break for it as Midoriya faced him atop the narrow wall. Midoriya brandished one of his cattle prods in clear view as he approached Aizawa. The tension in the air was palpable. What is the problem child thinking? What's the deal with the cattle prod? Why is he just walking forward? What's the deal with the cattle prod? The two were mere feet apart, and Midoriya dropped the cattle prod. Time felt suspended in the air like the weapon haphazardly tossed between the opponents. The moment was shattered by a sudden bang! Aizawa could have sworn his check engine light turned on as his every sense stuttered. Before the underground hero could reorient himself, the cattle prod was jammed into his side. The teacher convulsed and collapsed from the high voltage of the weapon. Nezu watched from his wrecking ball as one of the green-haired students ran in his direction. The combination of her powerful legs and her loaned grappling hook let her effortlessly traverse the top of the maze. The frog-quirked girl scaled the base of the demolition equipment, despite the missing ladder, like a squirrel up a tree. When Asui eventually made it into the cab, it didn't take long to tie up the principal and for her to take control of the wrecking ball. Asui reached for the communicator in her ear to confirm the takeover of the wrecking ball. After receiving detailed instructions from Midoriya, she began to use the controls to guide the ball in a set path. Keiko was so mad that the weights kept him from flying over the walls. He flew into another dead end and made to turn around when his exit was suddenly cut off by a weighted net wall. Keiko grumbled and pulled a feather blade to cut through the net. The booms of walls falling in rapid succession grew closer and closer, and suddenly the wall behind him crumbled, revealing Yaoyorozu and a cannon of her own creation. Another weighted net launched from the cannon and pinned the winged man to the ground. Yaoyorozu walked over, plucked the green flag from Keiko's belt, and used her grappling hook to take to the top of the maze once more. Aizawa didn't regain consciousness until a few minutes after the end of the test. It turns out Midoriya freed Jiro to have her exit the gate with the rest of the team, but he left Mineta hogtied at the random dead end Aizawa left him in. Hitoshi sighed and rubbed his temple as Keiko ran in circles, whooping with joy as he held his new hero license in the air, with both hands. The loud blonde has returned to being loud. Great. As annoying as the boundless enthusiasm and bird noises no human man should be able to make were, Hitoshi was glad his big brother was joyful. After everything Keiko had done for him and Izuku, Hitoshi couldn't bring himself to ask him to quiet down. He deserved to be happy like this without the commission breathing down his neck. Chapter 22. Whispers of the Forgotten Past. Ninth, it whispered. Ninth! Ninth! Izuku shot awake into a void of pitch-black nothing. His limbs felt like static, and his heart raced. His arm was outstretched to grab something just out of his reach. Hitoshi! His cry was choked and desperate. Hitoshi! Izuku sobbed. He could hardly remember what was happening. All he remembered was one of the people he cherished most getting dragged into a swirling purplish-black portal, with a burnt hand gripping his neck. You should be thinking about this logically. Shinzo had his gear on him from training with it earlier that day, and he knew how to handle himself. They had faced worse. They had killed worse than those wannabe supervillains. But they did it together. They hadn't been separated like this since they met, not knowing when they'd see each other again. Ninth. Izuku shook as he tried to get a grip on himself. He needed to regroup with the other outcasts, get Hitoshi's locations, and hunt down those miserable bastards. I'm going to make sure they suffer tenfold for whatever they've done to Hitoshi by the time I get there. If he has so much of as a scratch on him, I'll make sure they forget what it's like to eat solid food. Ninth, can you calm down for us, please? That finally forced Izuku to take in his surroundings. He was standing on a stone island floating in a black void. Standing before him was a pale, wiry man with thin white hair and piercing green eyes. He had a sad, understanding look in his eyes as he glanced past Izuku at somebody behind him. Izuku whirled around and had to process the 7 other figures sharing the island with him. The island housed a strange throne room with 8 large stone thrones. The walls looked like a destroyed vault, with bits of debris floating in the void. 3 of the unidentified people, all of whom appeared to be wearing hero costumes, looked at him in utter shock. One had her back turned to him as she pouted in the corner. There was a mass of golden flames that looked vaguely like All Might sitting in one of the thrones. One of the two men closer to him looked smugged, and the other one was making eye contact with the white-haired man. The man closest to Izuku turned his gaze from the white-haired man to meet Izuku's eyes. His face softened, and he knelt to be at eye level with the greenette. Hi, Ninth. You're probably confused. You're standing in the core of One for All. The people you see around you, including me, are vestiges. You had a brief run-in with Degoro over there. He gestured to the familiar bald man wearing goggles and an excessive amount of leather. Izuku blinked and processed for a second. He remembered his strange dreams from earlier in the school year, and Degoro telling him about Black Whip. This was, however, his first time seeing all of them this clearly and getting the chance to speak back to them. Izuku looked up at the man who stood before him. He had short, spiky salmon-colored hair, a thick military-grade jacket, and wrist-mounted firearms. A large and gnarly scar marred the middle of his face, and his fierce eyes held a glint that he recognized from Hawks, Yelovich, and his 3E classmates. This man, whoever he was, understood the burden of killing for the greater good. You keep calling me Ninth, Izuku started. My name is Izuku Midoriya, and I'd prefer if you used it. You can call me Izuku. He turned to look back at the white-haired man. You can call me Izuku as well. The salmon-haired man cleared his throat to regain Izuku's attention before introducing himself. Well, I'm Kudo, the second user of One for All, and the man behind you is Yoichi, the first user, and the man behind me with the smug grin is Bruce. Izuku nodded and looked around for a second. It was nice meeting you all, but why exactly am I here? Yoichi chuckled and stood from his crouch to guide Izuku to the circle of stone thrones, Kudo and Bruce following them. Izuku, none of us realized you'd get here so quickly. But to make a long story short, One for All has reached the point of singularity. It has grown so powerful that it has completely changed from its original function. Originally, users could only tap into the raw stockpiled power, but now you're able to access much more. Yoichi gestured vaguely at an empty part of the circle, where a ninth throne rose from the ground. He motioned for Izuku to sit in the new seat. Izuku complied, and Yoichi took the seat to his left. Kudo sat on Yoichi's left and Bruce on his left. Then there was the oldest-looking vestige, Degoro, the youngest-looking, excluding Izuku, an empty seat, and the half-formed vestige of All Might. Glowmite. Glowmite was on Izuku's right, making a full circle. The empty seat presumably belonged to the woman in the corner. Seventh, if he counted correctly. Oh, hi again, Sprout, Degoro greeted. You got here fast. The young one nodded in agreement. Yes, you are far more skilled than any of us thought you would be. I'm the sixth, but you can call me En. I'm the fourth. My name is Hikage Shinomori. Call me Hikage. I'm also the original user of Danger Sense. The oldest greeted. Oh, that's what the quirk's called? I called it Uncanny Dodge. Izuku took up a thinking pose before smiling. You all can call me Izuku. Y'all are living in my head, so might as well use my given name. Let's cut to the chase, Yoichi interjected. The eyes of everyone seated turned to the first. Izuku will be getting all of our quirks. We already knew this after he manifested Black Whip, and that was cemented when he awakened Danger Sense. He was supposed to get Float a month ago, but... The thin man trailed off and grimaced. The rest of the vestiges followed suit and slowly turned their heads to look at the woman in the corner. The woman stiffened and began shaking, but didn't move or say anything. Yoichi cleared his throat again. He manifested Smokescreen today and activated it during the attack on the summer camp. But I'm not sure it was noticed with the villain spewing his toxic gas quirk all over the forest. He should be getting Fajin, Bruce's quirk, next, and Gearshift, Kudo's quirk, shortly after it. It could be anywhere from a few days from now to before dawn. Well, I think you already have a good idea of how Danger Sense works, Izuku, but if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask, Hickage supplied. En nodded and raised his hand. Smokescreen is rather simple. If you are familiar with other weapons, so if you've ever used a smoke bomb effectively, you shouldn't have any problems using it. Izuku confirmed that he knew how to use smoke bombs, and added that his goggles had heat vision, and his mask doubled as a respirator if the smoke was anything that could cause lung issues. Fajin's a strength enhancer? Bruce started. It takes built-up kinetic energy and releases all of it in a sort of burst. It's much like how you use One for All when you use it at higher percentages. Speaking of which, you're at 28 baseline and 40% in short bursts already. Nice job! I mean, he started at 12%, Kudo added. Yeah, and Gearshift isn't too complicated for somebody that already has pretty good aim. We'll get into semantics when you manifest it, but for a quick rundown, it lets the user quickly accelerate objects through different gears, for lack of a better term. I used it in tandem with my gauntlets to launch pebbles at the speed of bullets. Kudo lifted up his arms to show off the weaponry to the greenette. Izuku stood to analyze the weapon, so that he could get Mei or Itana to remake them when the woman in the corner scoffed. Of course the killers and weapons lovers get along. Let's just give the brat more ideas on how to assassinate people instead of how to make him a better hero, she grumbled under her breath. The room quieted and turned to look at the seventh. Kudo and Bruce's glares were especially hateful. The woman shook and seethed. She whipped around and sneered at Izuku and the men sitting behind him. She pointed her finger at him and shouted, "How dare you be so accepting of a liar? That boy is a killer, and he tricked Toshi into thinking he was a worthy successor. He's too jaded to be the next symbol of peace, and I refuse to call him his successor." Tears began to stream down her face as her anger exploded. Kudo stood abruptly and put himself between the raging woman and Izuku before shouting back with vitriol and anger. One for All was never meant to be used to create a symbol of peace. Its sole purpose was to defeat All for One, something he already promised to do, and something we all failed to do, including your beloved Toshi. The remaining vestiges looked back and forth like they were watching a tennis match played with a live grenade instead of a ball. The argument ends with Kudo protectively hugging Izuku while he points an accusing finger at the seventh, and the seventh red-faced and reeling. Yoichi couldn't help but compare it to the scene of an old meme of a woman yelling at a white cat in a restaurant. Both ends of the shouting match were exhausted from screaming at each other for a solid 10 minutes. Kudo sighed and slumped back into his seat and groaned. "Don't listen to the mad woman, Izuku. You're above her," Bruce finally intervened. The seventh, now known as Nana, crumpled into a cross-legged position and rolled her head to look at the non-existent ceiling. She took in a deep breath and let it out slowly. "I concede," she said, her voice hoarse. "He is a damaged being that must be protected. His status as an assassin does not make him too jaded or unworthy but is instead an asset. The true purpose of One for All has nothing to do with being the symbol of peace, and therefore, Izuku does not have to become the next one. She said the entire mantra in a monotone voice, reiterating the points Izuku had yelled at her for minutes. I still think he should have told Toshi about the whole being a licensed assassin thing, she pouted. That was top secret, Anne argued. Well, he was told 2 extremely well-kept secrets, Nana retorted. But neither of those secrets came with NDAs like his, Anne replied calmly. Those were his secrets to tell, and his alone. Izuku had no obligation to break an NDA for somebody he just met and didn't plan on getting to know. Most of us were not cherry-picked to become the next greatest hero. We just happened to be the nearest trustworthy person when our predecessors died. That's how you got picked, after all. So just be glad your successor lived long enough not to have to do that, too. Nana reluctantly joined them in the circle and flopped onto her throne. Yoichi waved his hands around again and made a large table in the center of the circle. So who's up for a couple rounds of Uno? The first asked, holding up a deck of brightly colored and well-loved cards. Izuku woke slowly to the smell of antiseptics and the light of partially dimmed fluorescent bulbs. He was in a hospital. He blinked a couple of times and stretched, causing a couple bones to pop. He sat up and noticed he wasn't alone. In the room were Keigo, Denki, his mom, Mei, and Itana. The room wasn't too full yet, but from the sounds of it, 2 more people were talking just outside the door. His mom, Denki, and Mei were sleeping, Denki and Mei leaning against each other. Itana was tinkering with something, and Keigo leaned against the wall. Silently, Keigo motioned for Izuku and Itana to follow him. Izuku carefully removed his blanket. Thankfully, he was still in his own clothes. His jacket was hanging on the bed's railing, and his boots were underneath it. The cleats were retracted so the boots were completely silent on the tile floor. The 3 assassins left the room without disturbing the other 3. What do you mean he was authorized to eliminate that villain? Aizawa hissed. The woman he was arguing with wore a black hooded jumpsuit with a furry pale golden brim. Fox ears sat atop her hood in the same color as the jumpsuit's brim. She wore several holsters for various weapons and a utility belt. She had a blank expression as she talked down the irate teacher. I am not at the liberty to discuss this with you at the moment. Under Article 23 of the UN's International Hero Code and Protocol 42 of the International Assassins Guild, I, Arena Blonde Fox Yelovich, will be taking Izuku, Viridian Rabbit Midoriya, Itana, Ivory Spider Haribe, and Keigo, Carmine Eagle Takumi with me for debriefing. You are to stand down or face consequences under the jurisdiction of the United Nations. After Arena had finished her legal jargon spiel, she nodded to Aizawa. Have a good night, Aizawa-san, she said, and walked away, Izuku, Itana, and Keigo falling into step behind her. Aizawa took a second to process what had just happened. The International Pro Hero Kaminari interned with just told him to stop poking around in other people's businesses under the threat of retaliation from the UN. And this woman, his student, the former number 3 pro hero, and a support corps student were all affiliated with the International Assassins Guild in some way. What the hell was going on? God have mercy on his soul. While frantically doing damage control over the recent attack, Nezu sneezed. Okay, so I've gotten a comment, like, when I posted this chapter online about people saying that they probably missed a couple things. Surprise! Spoiler alert, that's the point. I decided that, wouldn't it be funny to just, skip the entire training camp and just go straight to the action. So that's what I did, and that's what y'all have to deal with, because that's what what I wanted to do. At least you get some sort of like little intermission, kind of. I was originally just gonna go straight to, oh yeah, we're blowing up Kamino now. Like, I was just gonna go straight to Hitoshi's perspective after getting kidnapped, instead of just Izuku after Hitoshi gets kidnapped. At least here, you get a little bit of context on what the hell the rescue mission might look like. Or at least the context that it's going to happen, instead of it just busting down the door. Literally. I don't know, that, and you get a little bit more insight into what the hell's going on with all the past users. Yay! I don't know, I'm sorry for this taking absolutely forever to get here. I planned to record this a week ago, but then I just didn't. And now I have an hour worth of recording that I need to sort through and potentially post. I could have easily just made this 2 separate videos, but what do? I record both of them in tandem together as one video because this could have easily been 2 chapters. The two videos. These are 2 of the longest chapters in this fic, and I just decided, yeah, let's just post both of them all at once. I love it. You go from having like 15 minutes of content to having an hour of content. I hope you like it. Because that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing today. That is what we're doing today. You get an hour of content, and I need a glass of water because my throat really freaking hurts from all of the yelling that I did. If you have a couple questions, I'll try to answer them. If it's a spoiler, I won't answer them. Or I might answer them vaguer than Nezu playing a game of chess. That made no sense. I need to get better at that analogy. Whoops. Anyway, have a great day. Remember to hydrate, not dehydrate. And, maybe get some sleep at a decent hour. Either way, y'all are lovely. Y'all are great. Love you guys. Have a good night. Or whatever. Where's the off button?